When he said those words, it arrested me. It it was profound. I had never heard anyone talk about trauma like that before. I've heard a lot of people say a lot of things about trauma. I've studied it a lot because I have worked through my childhood trauma. I've worked through childhood emotional neglect. I've worked through even emotional trauma that's happened to me as an adult. So I'm familiar with a lot of things about trauma, but when he said those words, I'd never heard anyone put it like that before. And it was on a TV program, of all things. But sometimes stories are how we are able to assimilate information and see things that we couldn't see before. So when I was watching this with my husband and he said those words, and he's a doctor, he was a psychologist. And a lot of times they use a lot of big fancy words, which I'm not big on big fancy words and technical terms and all that. I've done study of that because I need to understand all the scientific stuff about trauma and childhood emotional neglect. But we can get lost in all those big fancy words. But the words he used were so simple and they were so, the imagery of it was so vivid. And it's on a program called New Amsterdam. And what had happened is they started the program with recapping a little bit of the pandemic and what they'd all been through and all the trauma that had happened with that. But then while they were, dealing with that, and one of their friends was on a ventilator hoping to get this person off of it, then suddenly there's this big rumbling and the whole hospital is shaking. And so they run outside and there's this plane that crashes into, the river next to them. And, they have all the trauma people coming in who are injured and all that stuff. But then there's the pilot who's sitting on the edge of a bed, and he's physically not injured at all, but he's just in a catatonic stare. And authorities come and they want to arrest him, but, the psychologist guy who said these profound words, he took him away to talk with him, to help get him out of this. He loved him because love is what brings us out of that. Love is what heals. And this psychologist, this character on this program, he was loving him. And he's talking to this guy about what might be going on in his head, being the psychologist that he was. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm a coach, among other things. And then he said those words. After he explained to him what was probably going on in his mind, he says to him, trauma is a beast. It's like, wow, a beast. I've heard that, trauma is hard and it's bad and all kinds of stuff, but beast gave it a face. Beast made it the awful thing that it is. And he went on to say about how what makes trauma a beast is it's invisible. Trauma isn't something that we see with our eyeballs. It's not an event. People call it an event. There are traumatic events, but trauma happens inside of a person where we cannot see it. It is invisible. But he said to this guy who was in this catatonic stare, he said, it's invisible, but it's real. It is just as real as cancer. I was like, wow. Another profound way of putting it. And he went on to say, even more profound, I have been saying this for a long time, but in his context, it was just so awesome, of just like cancer, if you don't address it, if you don't attack it, if you don't go after it and deal with it, it gets worse. Cancer doesn't go away all by itself, and trauma doesn't go away all by itself. But we deal with it that way. A lot of times we deal with it that way. We feel like dealing with trauma makes us weak. It doesn't. it makes us hurt more. And I really appreciated this program, and I was researching more about that and about beast and getting a definition of beast, and I thought of Beauty and the Beast and how he had turned into a beast, and I came across an article about Prince Henry, because the Beast and the Beauty and the Beast used to be a prince, and Prince Henry has suffered childhood trauma, or Prince Harry, the son of Princess Diana, who was killed, and the trauma that he went through and why, and details about that, and how trauma's a beast. But then as I was researching that, of trauma, of beast, and then I thought of, well, what's another way to put that? I looked up the word monster. And you know, a beast is an animal that's dangerous. But an animal's real. But if you look up monster, monster is an imaginary creature that's ugly and scary. And that's what happens with childhood trauma, I was seeing. Because with childhood trauma, it's just as invisible as adult emotional trauma. But children blame themselves and they internalize it. And so to them, their trauma isn't real. It's a monster. It's not real. It's imaginary. It's all their fault and it's not really real. And so they internalize it and never do anything about it. And like cancer, if it's not addressed, it gets worse. And I just thought about how when people get diagnosed with cancer, they run to the doctor, they run for chemotherapy, and what can they do to get rid of it? They're going to do whatever they can to get rid of this cancer, right? But when people recognize they have trauma, they don't respond the same way a lot of times. Some people do. But a lot of people, they dismiss it and they hide it and they say, you know, it's not real, like that monster I was talking about. But to get rid of the trauma in our life, or to get rid of the side effects of that trauma, because that's how we recognize it in our life, is by the side effects, the symptoms that happen, the anger issues that we have, the trust issues that we have, the inability to maintain good relationships, and the depression, the anxiety, the passive-aggressive behaviors, and the list goes on of how we can identify if we have that imaginary, quotes, imaginary thing in our life, because it's not imaginary, and we need to address it. And so why am I talking about this with you? Because I want to encourage you to see if you have this imaginary monster, little quotes with my fingers I'm saying here, if you have this, you know, this monster in your life, or this beast in your life of trauma, and you're trying to ignore it and it won't go away. I want you to encourage you to love yourself enough to look into it, to see, is this the cause of your issues, and to get some help. There's no shame in getting help. You are not weak. Trauma is not the fault of the person who has been traumatized. It's something that has taken place inside of your psyche. And there's hope. You can heal. You can always heal. Starting from today, you can heal. So I want to encourage you to, first off, see if that is the cause of whatever issues in your life. We all have issues, but not all of the causes are trauma or childhood trauma. But is it? It could be. And if it is, the second thing I want to encourage you to do is to get help. If you need counseling, then connect with a counselor and find one that fits you real good, because I'm not a counselor. And if you don't want a counselor, or you feel like that's overkill for whatever you need, then you can reach out to me. I'm a coach, and I have a course, Heal Your Childhood Self, that can walk you through that, and I can coach you through that also. Or you can find a good book, but the bottom line is, do something to get rid of the beast. Do something to get rid of the monster. Attack it like a person attacks cancer, and get healed and get free, because you're worth it, because you matter. I love you, and that's why I do this. That lady on the internet who loves you, Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive. We survive the monsters, we survive the beasts, but they will attack and kill us because trauma does kill people, gives people all kinds of diseases when it is not addressed. And so please, love yourself and do something to find out if this is the source, and then chase it down and attack that beast, slay that monster, and get free because you matter. I love you.